Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Joe Anthony. This is the Marketing Matchup, where we bring together some of the sharpest minds in financial services marketing. Here's the twist. Our two guests didn't know they're going to be on the show together, so they're sitting here for the first time. Why do we do this? Well, we want raw, insightful takes on the role that marketers play in the growth of financial services. We don't want any pre-prep and exchanging of notes. We want to be raw, insightful, and spark some conversation. So going from here, I'd love to make a quick introduction here. We have Darcy O'Brien, who's Chief Marketing Officer at Simon Quick Advisors out of the New York, New Jersey market, and Jim Mocci, who's the CMO at EP Wealth Advisors out of California. Thank you both for joining.
Yeah, hi, Joe. Great to be here.
So let's get right into it. I'd love to hear a little bit from you, both of you, just sort of a quick update where you're at in your marketing life with your firms. Give us 2 minutes on what's shaking at Simon Quick, Darcy.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. I just celebrated my 10-year anniversary at Simon Quick in a marketing role. So that's definitely a big development. And I've been building out our program since 2015. And in the early days, I was really just building out the core structure of our marketing infrastructure, making sure that we can send out email communications, that we're set up with a great website and a social media presence, an active blog. And over the years, as we've developed, we've been adding layers and new marketing strategies year by year, brick by brick. And this year, we're really focused on making a couple of big firm announcements that I'll tease. More to come there, but we're hopeful to have a couple of exciting announcements to make later this year. And we're also really sophisticating our digital strategy. We've been running digital strategies, but we've partnered with a new agency, and we're really focused on launching some more prospect-focused content strategies to drive new traffic to a brand new website that is launching this month. So those are some of the recent goings on at Simon Quick.
That's exciting. Good stuff to look forward to. It's always fun seeing how firms represent their websites after the think tank process. So we'll look forward to checking that out. Jim, what's shaking at EP?
Yeah, so we've been busy. I'm just closing in on 3 years at EP in May. And so in that time, or at least during my tenure, we've really tried to rebuild and reinvigorate what we do or what we're doing on the marketing side, in particular when it comes to lead generation and the ROI related to how we spend money to grow the firm through marketing. So it's been an adventure, and we've had some great success. But with any good marketing, right, or any marketing program, it's not just about marketing. It's about the advisors. It's about sales teams. It's about technology. It's about all of these pieces. So we were really focusing on building the system so that when the leads flow, we know what to do with them. We can handle them. We get them to the right advisors, and we can close deals. So that's really was an initial really big push. Along the way, we've been, of course, working on PR, and with the hiring of Kyle Miller, who was leading our M&A team at EP, we really also have kind of been diving into marketing related to supporting our M&A efforts, our partnership efforts. So I think there's a little bit of everything happening at EP at the moment.
Well, and I appreciate you sharing that. And I think both of you gave a good glimpse of what's happening now. But let me pull back for a second. In pulling the strings and trying to get the two of you on the podcast together, and why do I want the two of you to match up? The short strokes are this. From what I know about both of your firms, the founders, the people that started the business, their character was really fundamentally about how the firm went to market in the early days of the firm. And both of you, along the way, represented the firm's effort to have a more empowered direction marketing, growing beyond the founder footprint. Not that the founders aren't relevant anymore, but in the sense of it's become more than just a couple names who have been there since day one, right? And so I think there's a real challenge there, because at the same time you have a legacy to build off of, you have a story to tell that's so connected to the marketplace. But at the same time, you're also growing, trying to account for the next generation, and you might be delivering new services or connecting to new markets. And so I'd like you to both give me some insights there. When you think about your role and what it means to be at a firm that had so identified with its founders and what you're tasked with doing, what is the biggest challenge in that moment when you realize that you're really been tasked to take a sort of founder-led brand and turn it into an institutionalized brand? Jim, I know the story of Derek and Brian pretty well, but I think I'd like you to go first here and just talk about a little bit what it means to step into that challenge.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And, for Derek and Brian, who founded EP, lifelong friends, like friends from 5th, 6th grade kind of thing, right? Worked in a yogurt shop together, finished college, started a firm after a few years in the business at other firms, all on this principle of really wanting to put people and clients first. And so it's, in some ways, your question is, it's hard to answer. There's so many parts, but in other ways, it's really easy, right? Like these guys built a firm to put clients at the center of everything we do. And that's been what we have to this day, right? That is the ethos of the firm. And so in many, many ways, it's actually simplified, right? We don't have a meandering sort of focus, right? Maybe the way we're activating this business is different. Maybe M&A is playing a bigger role, or marketing's playing a bigger role than it used to. Our website looks different, but no matter what, it's always been that the client at the center. So, which is, really helpful as a marketer too, right? When the core message and the core focus is so stable. Interestingly, with Brian and Derek, right, is they got to a point at which they said, hey, we want to go back to being advisors, not running a business and wearing so many hats, right? We want to start taking some hats off, get back to focusing on clients. And so they hired a CEO, and Patrick Gustigian, kind of 10 years into the firm, 11 years into the firm. And they stepped away from running the business day to day, right? And when they're focusing on clients, which again is just this, this ethos of putting clients first. And so in a lot of ways, at EP, we've had, Brian and Derek with their focus on being advisors and focusing on clients has really made it easy as a business, right, to say, okay, that's the core thing. And now how do we activate as operators to help grow and deliver on the promise that they want to make? And so that, I think that's kind of a unique thing, right, at EP.
Great. And so, Darcy, how would you characterize the challenge you walk through? You use the words brick by brick, which tells me that it wasn't a knee-jerk dive in. You really had to push things forward. Tell us a little bit about your journey and experience as you're building out the growth marketing engine at Simon Quick.
Yeah, in our early days, we definitely focused a lot of our business development and marketing efforts around our founding partners, Peter Simon and Les Quick. And a very abbreviated version of our story is that the firm was founded by Les Quick in 2004. His family went through a liquidity event, and he went to the regular players on Wall Street and was really dissatisfied with the options he could find to manage his wealth. And thus, Simon Quick was born, right? He founded the firm. And in 2017, we merged with the Simon family. So that brought family office capabilities in-house to our firm, which enabled us to expand our offering and attract even more high net worth clients. So telling the story of Les's experience is something that we still do to this day. However, when you ask the question, how do we evolve as a firm, as we've grown beyond just, a small founder-led business, we now have 20 advisors and 20 plus people telling the story. We've really evolved to focus on what are those core themes, right? So it's less about Les's individual journey and more about the ethos, the themes, why we were founded, and how we continue to pull those values through to this day.
I love what you said there, Darcy, in terms of really why we were founded. And I think it's actually something that both your firms share, that the why, the driving force that brings the business to its current reason for being. And I think that in terms of how it influences marketing is a big question, right? So, some firms lean into platitudes or their target markets, and others lead into that story. When you're talking about things like referral marketing and digital marketing, those things play out differently. I'm just curious. I was going to ask this question, but tell me a little bit, like, how does the why factor in, right? Like, how do you make that show up in your marketing, your storytelling, your brand promotion in a way where it's repeatable and worthwhile and doesn't sound like some sort of trite narrative? Like, what are you doing to really bring that forward? Toss up. Either one of you have any comment there?
Sure, I can jump in. We did a important exercise with our team here to get to the core of our why. And we've set a vision for the firm, which we've determined is to set the standard for trust in wealth management. And that is our big, lofty goal. 20 plus years from now, that's what we want to really be known for. And how do we get there? It's by giving our clients the freedom to pursue what matters most to them. So on a day-to-day basis, why do we do what we do? It's to give that freedom back to our clients. And I think to a certain degree as well, that makes our team members feel really fulfilled and have freedom in their own lives, to feel like they're doing good work for good people and really creating a positive impact in the world.
Yeah.
Jim, anything to add on that?
Well, no, I think that was a great answer, Darcy. Because I was going to go similar, right? Our vision is enriching lives one relationship at a time, right? So same idea is, and for us, that means not just clients, but that's partners and employees, right? And so how does this business enrich everyone's lives, and how are we built to deliver on that? And that's, so I think it's pretty consistent with what Darcy said.
So, and I appreciate the perspective there. And I think now let's move away a little bit from the softer side, the story, the why. Something jumped out at me recently, just reviewing. There's always stats that come out from all these different places, the ensemble practice, Cerulli, Spectrum. You get all these different nuggets, you get the Fidelity and Schwab benchmarking studies, and they talk about growth and all these different trends. And one of the things that caught my eye, and I read it differently because I was going through again saying, is there anything fresh that says what organic growth was like? And the freshest data you have is the Schwab report saying it was 5.3% for the average firm in their study in 2023. I'm like, that's not much different from the 3 to 5 range we saw before. And then the next layer of data I saw that I thought was really interesting, and this is moving over to something I saw that came out of BlackRock and the ensemble practice, was saying actually 20% of the RIAs out there are averaging double-digit growth. That's, so 11, 15, 20%. That means there's a whole host of firms on the other side of that barbell that are going the other way. And so when I think about this and like what I want people to hear from two bright marketers like you, like, what do you do to get in that bracket of double-digit growth besides buying other firms, right? Or hoping the market goes up? What can you do? Because right now, buying firms is a strategy. Hoping the market grow up. Yeah, the markets have been very favorable the last decade. But what do you do? And what are some commonalities or sort of winning traits, things that you find successful at your firms that help you lean into that organic growth opportunity?
I think it's really important to mention right off the bat that client retention and your client service has to be really strong. If you aren't providing excellent service to your clients and you have a leaky hole at the bottom of your boat, right? And it doesn't matter how much more you try to fill it with new clients. If you're draining them each year, you're just going to be treading water. So I think at the very least, to have a strong foundation, you need to provide an excellent client experience to your clients and make sure that you're keeping the clients that you have really happy, which dovetails into my other favorite topic of conversation, which is client referrals, right? This is the best, cheapest business you will ever win if you have clients out there evangelizing for you. It makes our lives as marketers a whole lot easier, and that really stems from the client experience. So I think those are some of the key elements you need to have a healthy business running. And then your marketing team can employ a wide variety of strategies to start attracting new organic customers. And some of the ones we'll be utilizing this year in our digital program are around content strategies, paid and webinar hostings that we're really excited about. So there's definitely layers to add there, but being really thoughtful about how strong is your foundation.
Great. And Jim, what would you add to that?
Yeah. I would add, you have to make some bets, right? And you have to have these bets so that you can measure them and see the impact and then make a decision of good bet, bad bet, try again, don't try again kind of thing, right? So marketing is not, there are low cost sort of ways to convert clients, but you're going to be waiting for them, right? Organic search and people visit your website or they, see your logo somewhere. Those are, that's great, effective dollars, right? But I would say if you want to more proactively own and control and drive growth, you've got to spend money, right? It's an ROI and you've got to invest in that and you've got to be able to measure it. So I think the other piece that can be uncomfortable for folks is that there's a little bit of a barrier to entry there, right? Like if you're going to pay $10,000 for every new client, and you want, a bunch of 10 new clients a month, are you willing to spend $100,000, right, on that marketing to get that, right? The math is very simple. So it's that, I think, that is, marketing is a long-term play, and you're going to pay up front, as opposed to maybe some referral programs where you pay across the life of it's just the math is a little bit different, but you just have to be, are you willing to make those bets and then optimize from them?
Well, it's actually, Jim, what you talk about in terms of making bets implies some risk. And so I asked both of you before this, what's something you're reading or I've read it for marketing inspiration. And Darcy talked about The Purple Cow by Seth Godin. And one of the takeaways in his book is that we're in an era where it's actually safer to be risky in terms of how we approach things. And the idea that you have to put yourself out on a limb and do something different to challenge the norms, the paradigms. And so the idea of taking a bet, you don't necessarily have the full proof case, is obviously real compelling. Like, Darcy, is there anything that you'd say that fits that sort of ism from Seth, where the idea is it's actually safer to be risky? Like, what's something new that Simon Quick is trying in its marketing mix?
Yeah, I think that when I think about The Purple Cow, what I like about Seth Godin's philosophy so much is that your marketing strategy is integral to your business strategy. They are completely interlinked, right? And essentially what he's saying is that you want to build a business that's a purple cow, that it gets people to stop and look, because it's so different than everything else that you're seeing in the marketplace. And I think that is, you could put the best marketing strategy on top of a boring firm, and it's just not really going to resonate with people because it's not authentic. It isn't unique. So when I think about what is Simon Quick's Purple Cow, it really is our client experience. And a lot of firms out there will say that, but we have a 1-to-30 advisor-client ratio with dedicated teams of at least 3 to 4 people. So our clients really do get a lot of white glove attention and personalized care from their advisors. So from a marketing standpoint, part of my job is to educate consumers about what their options are in the marketplace and what differentiates Simon Quick, with the client experience being one of those key elements.
And so do you have anything particularly you want to talk about when you start the foundation of the client experience? Is it it's something new from the risk standpoint? Is there anything you feel like is something frontier-minded in terms of how you're pushing that forward? Because I agree with everything you said. I think it makes sense, like being foundational about the client experience and thinking about how that connects to marketing. But I'm curious, is there anything where you feel like you're trying a new edge to hone the audience or connect with new folks?
Yeah, the strategy I would point to is really in the sophistication of our digital programs. So for the past number of years, we've done what I would call sort of garden variety digital strategies appropriate for smaller firms, which is where we were in our growth cycle. So email campaigns, updating the blog with new content, et cetera, et cetera. Where we're taking bets is really running more paid content, right? Whether it's on LinkedIn or Google, through ads to drive traffic to our site. And this is an area we've tested in the past with various levels of success. And so we're really partnering with a new agency we're working with to develop new messaging that we're going to be testing out to see what performs well. So to the idea of taking bets, you're kind of taking bets every quarter, right? When you put out a new line of messaging. And that is how I envision our program rolling out over the rest of this year.
And Jim, what's on the frontier for you all at EP? Where are you looking to push the envelope in 2025? Yeah, we, so the big bets or the risk is scale, right? We had X net new assets last year for marketing, and we want X times 3 next year, right? And so it's, how do we get there? What are the ways that you use money wisely? Scaling digital marketing, scaling lead flow is, 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of thing. So you need to take your bets on where the campaigns you're going to spend against, the targeting you're going to spend against, maybe even the lead sources you're going to spend against, monitor and optimize. And so I actually take a lot of bets, right? There's a lot of bets always happening, and I don't see them as failures, right? I am happy to learn and shut down a lead source, just as happy as I am to learn that they're good and I should spend more money on them, right? And crank up our lead flow. Additionally, big bets are around, probably Darcy's had this experience, and every marketing person at an RIA has had this experience, is some advisors want and love and are going to do a great job with marketing leads, and some aren't. And so you've got to find your people, right? You've got to find the right place to send leads. And you've got to get the right people to qualify leads, right? We don't think that advisors should call through a stack of 1,000 Facebook leads. We have a team that does that. And so having the right people do that qualification work is really important. So, there's bets we're making, both in terms of how and from whom do we generate leads, but then also how do we validate and qualify those leads, and then who do we send those leads to convert?
So as you look at this, and Jim, you said something, and Darcy also mentioned something earlier that ties back to this, and the idea that a colleague of mine recently said, I don't think you need to have a marketing degree to be a marketer anymore. I think you need to have an analytics degree. And that mindset, you're talking about marketing as it moves up the food chain in terms of the consciousness of the overall decision making from the CEO level, the board level, and there's a degree of accountability and whether it's verifying leads or tracking what the impact of certain marketing spends are. Darcy, tell us a little bit what you're doing to sort of justify the existence of marketing. Like, what are the things that you think are really like where the rubber meets the road points that your team's looking at? Like, are there analytical tools that you like? Or is there more of a philosophical commitment to marketing that sort of gives you some grace around these things? Tell us about what Simon Quick is doing there.
There are so many different metrics you can measure as a marketer. And the way I've tried to make sense of it all is to just focus on what is the end goal, and let's work backwards from there. So at the beginning of this year, we're right in it, February. I've just been finalizing all of our marketing plans. I've set goals for the team and working backwards from here's how much we're spending on our digital program. I'm running some numbers and saying how much revenue do I expect this to generate? How many clients do we need to win through this strategy in order for us to see a positive ROI? And then working back from there. We use Salesforce. And so I'm going to use Salesforce language here. We first enter a lead that converts into an opportunity. That means they're in our sales funnel. And if they make it through the sales funnel and become a client, they have officially become a client of our firm. So those are the key numbers. If we want to hit X number of clients, we need to get X number of opportunities and X number of leads. And so I created a dashboard in Salesforce that tracks these numbers. And each week when I sit with my marketing team, we're talking about what are the activities that we are doing this week to generate leads that will fill through to that funnel. Are we on track? Are we behind? What do we need to do to get us back on track? And that really gets the whole team rallied around a number that we can all see on a scoreboard and see how we're doing.
And Jim, at EP, what's your take on the metrics that matter, and how are you tracking ROI on some of the things? Is there a sort of, again, like a halo effect associated with marketing, the firm's belief of brand building that gives you some grace around these things, or are there specific metrics that really are hard and fast as part of what you're developing?
There are, the brand halo, of course, doesn't hurt, right? However, there are, very specific metrics that we measure. We've operated our lead gen program initially in pivot tables, right? Like, we are full data nerds. We track very carefully the source and the campaign, where the leads come from, who the leads go to, what the conversion rates are, and the amount of money we've spent on each of those leads. Ultimately, we have a cost per million of net new assets is the Claremont ROI measure. And there's an amount we're willing to spend per $1 million of net new assets, right? And so as long as the marketing costs are coming below that, we want to do as much of that as we can. And so we measure very carefully in that regard. The other metrics that we measure are more like it's helpful for advisors to know and see like, oh, I've gotten 25 leads and my conversion rate is twice as good or half as good, right? And is there other coaching opportunities, is there development opportunities to help people kind of learn? So, we're looking at all the metrics up and down the board. And, I think we joke a little bit about, we kind of take the Moneyball approach, right, to marketing, where we're letting data make a ton of decisions. But we feel pretty good about that.
So that's fascinating. Obviously, the world of marketing has changed so much, and being able to measure how you're doing, as Darcy said, there's so many different metrics you can look to. And I think it also comes down to the fact that, in my mind, I have this theory that it's never been more pressure to be a marketer of a wealth management firm as there today. You talk about, custodian referral programs that might take a piece of the margin away if you're participating. You talk about the pressure that comes with you doing acquisitions, and both of your firms have done at least a couple. EP maybe a little more, but the idea being you have to justify those costs of acquisition. And so it all comes down to, when you're doing acquisitive growth, organic growth has to follow. If you're going to do referral marketing, you have to do it in such a systematic way. If you're capturing those custodian referrals, that you do at scale to justify that margin squeeze, right? And so in a lot of ways, I feel like the marketers are under more pressure today to justify their existence and deliver more and have the analytics to prove it. How do you create a culture as CMOs where there's this allegiance and focus on marketing as a driver, not a cost center, as a leader of firm objectives, as opposed to the gray area that sometimes people associate marketing with? Like, what are you doing internally? Like, and Darcy, I know you've been at it 10 years as a CMO at Simon Quick. So you're actually one of the very few that probably can legit say they were a CMO at our RIA for 10 years, because the industry as a whole hasn't done a lot of CMO-ifying until the last 5 years. So like, what are you doing to build that culture and sustain your role organizationally?
It's really important that senior leadership is invested in your marketing program and really aligned with the strategies that you're going to be implementing. And that's something I spend a lot of time working with our managing partners on, and education plays a huge role. So when I'm presenting to our executive committee, I make sure to take a step back and share really the reasons and the hypotheses behind why we are running certain strategies. I think it's easy to forget that my colleagues aren't heads down in marketing all day, right? They have a completely different set of concerns, whether that's running their client book or a different area of the business. And so some of these just fundamental marketing laws and knowledge is something that it's my job to educate them on. That, okay, this is why we're running a certain strategy. This is the effects we expect it to see. And by providing that education, you can get buy-in from senior leadership to really support your programs and to be invested in their success. I think that's super important. I also did something a little different this year, which was I created a video about the 2025 marketing plan and shared it with the entire firm. I think one of the things that's great about where we sit in marketing, at least at Simon Quick, but I imagine elsewhere also, is that people are pretty excited about marketing. Like, this is the fun part of the firm, right? Like, we get to do all the design work and create websites and content, and people like to know, hey, what are you doing? What's on the list for this year? So inviting them in more is definitely a tactic that I don't even like to call it a tactic. I think it's more of a philosophy and a spirit of inclusion that creates more enthusiasm for the entire firm to get aligned and get excited about your marketing program.
And Jim, from your perspective, you came in having led marketing in other financial service firms. You're stepping in over the last 3 years. What has it been like for you in terms of bringing that culture and that focus up to speed within EP and taking it to another level?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, because that culture matters, and the sort of existing experience of your advisors. If you're going to start generating marketing leads, this is maybe very specific to a marketer, but if you've got a bunch of advisors who have grown their books on referral and they're used to a 50, 60, 80% conversion rate, marketing leads are going to be a whole new experience, right? Like you're not going to get a 50% conversion rate of marketing leads. So that's kind of thing one is culturally, you have to understand that this is a different beast. But then the other thing is just, aligning the culture around growth, and not growth for growth's sake, but, we want to help as many clients as we can. So that's an element of more people to help. That's going to help us grow. Growth is good for all of our employees. It's good for our partners. Like we're all sort of rowing in that direction. And then the final step, of course, is you align incentives to that, right? For both advisors and employees. And I think that culturally, right, orients us to growth, and we celebrate growth. And it's part of the ethos. And I think also kind of the RIA industry is kind of wired that way, right? Like growth is one of our favorite topics broadly. So I think it's an easy thing for everyone to wrap their heads around.
And how closely aligned are the advisors within both of your firms? And Darcy, I'll start with you. I think I kind of would guess the answer based on what you said earlier about client referrals, but how closely aligned are the advisors to the marketing process? And can you have an institutionalized process with the advisors embedded, or is it easier for them to almost use marketing as a service within the organization?
I think that we take a client service approach to serving the advisors at our firm, and I think that's really critical. Our advisors are often on the front lines of pitching new business, and we want them to know that we are a resource here for them. So we very frequently are partnering on the creation of new marketing materials, helping with pitches. I see that as one of our core functions. And our advisors are not shy. They give us plenty of feedback. They let us know what they want. So part of my job is to keep a list and keep tabs of, what are the ideas that are bubbling up and which ones are getting enough support that we need to act on. That's part of our core offering to the firm and how we develop business.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. And again, I felt you're going that direction, knowing how important the client service experience is part of your marketing effort. Jim, what does that look like today at EP in terms of the advisor involvement? Where does the handoff come from your marketing efforts with the advisor, where you're providing support as well as equipping them with new leads?
Yeah, so we do both, right? Of course, there is support for whether there's sort of regional initiatives or a central repository, a library of materials that all of the advisors can access that are, ready to go with clients or custodians or others. So, we sort of provide that basic level of what I would say is like kind of the table stakes marketing support. And then additionally, the lead gen piece is a little bit different in that, it comes with, there's sort of a performance obligation, right? Like that it gets different than managing your own set of referrals or your local market, where your pressure is self-imposed, right? Versus marketing leads, we know we've spent some money, we know these leads need to get worked, we know there's competition in the world. So those come with a little more of like an active sort of management. But that's able to be worked through. So in terms of like your question around the sort of the sense of what does the advisor need to do or manage through is, an advisor in a regional office with, several other advisors, they're looking at these marketing leads that are coming in, and they can make a distinction of, hey, this is good for person X or person Y based on their growth goals, based on their desires, maybe it's personality or fit for the client. And so it's, it basically allows us to filter those, growth opportunities around a set of advisors and make sure that they're, so there's a little bit of, making sure, or a qualitative decision that can be made about who's the right person can get to.
Yeah, both great answers. And I think the idea of being at the service of the advisors obviously makes a lot of sense. I think very often the advisor is the one that might begin the first look at a referral if a happy client passes a name along. And I think having that built in as part of the work you're doing makes a lot of sense. If you were to give advice to other RIA marketers, wealth management marketers out there thinking about how to evaluate what they might need as a firm, I'll be curious to see what you would say to this. And my comment is, if you asked me 5 years ago, hey, Joe, when people come to Gregory FCA, what is the average RIA firm buying? What are they looking for? In many cases, even just 5 years ago, before the pandemic, it was they wanted brand visibility. And whether that showed up in terms of PR or awards or rankings, lists, whatever it might be, it was very much around what I would call a traditional pocket of PR, external visibility. Today, when they think of brand visibility, they think of it as across the traditional PR channels I talked about, but also SEO and SEM and degree social media or other content presence, where it's sort of become a multi-channel thought process. And so my reaction is, when you think about where to start, 5 years ago they're starting one way, today they're starting a different way. Not sure either one's the best place to start, but where would you tell a firm to start? Like, how would you say, okay, I haven't invested in this. How do I go about building marketing if you could start today, knowing what you know? And again, Darcy, I'm going to pick on you because you earlier you said you built it brick by brick. So I'm sure you have a pretty good idea of foundationally what you'd like a marketing mix to look like.
I know. I was afraid you were going to call on me.
50-50 chance, right?
Yeah, exactly. I teed myself up for this one. Well, I think my answer would be very highly dependent on where a firm is in their evolution and what sort of resources you have to work with. Those are the key factors that I would take into consideration, right? Like, how much money do you spend and what do you already have at your disposal? I'd also ask the question, what sort of talent do you have in-house, right? Do you have an advisor or a CIO who likes to talk and could be part of podcasts or go on TV, right? There are so many factors that could influence what direction you move in, versus maybe you don't have those sorts of talents and you want to focus more on writing, right? There's just a number of ways you could skin the cat. But I do think that, once you have sort of a core foundation built for your marketing program, some of the things you spoke to about your go-to-market strategies, that would be where I would look to. Do you have the resources to run a PR strategy? Great. If not, then maybe you're doing it yourself via social media, but think about ways you can get the word out and speak to your community.
And Jim, what would your advice be similarly in terms of you were starting from scratch today?
Yeah, I think, similarly to what Darcy said, you need to have your value propped down. You need to know who you serve and how you serve them, and where the value comes from, so that you're clear on who you're actually targeting. Right? You're not going to boil the ocean on day one. Then I think there's an element of I have an allergic reaction to dollars I can't track. Right, and so there is that sort of that's a tough situation when you're trying to just get started and build brand. And so there is a little bit of a leap of faith that's going to happen. And so, when I think about it, like through the dollars or the budget lens, there's some percentage of your budget that you're going to set top down. It's a percentage of revenue or however your firm does it, right? So there's some amount of money that you're willing to spend for general marketing as a cost of doing operations. Maybe it's a little bit of that marketing as a cost center mentality that you can apply to some of those things. But then on the other side, I think there's that bottoms up, like we can prove ROI. And so it's an investment, right? We know exactly what we're going to get back. And so how much money do we want to invest in this machine? And so I actually think a little bit of brand is good, but think of it as mid-funnel, right? Don't think of brand as going to fill the funnel. And then you can invest in that lead gen side, right? And start getting people to come through. And then, they're going to Google you before they meet with an advisor. Then they're going to find some of that brand content and find some of that social mid-funnel, right? And it's going to help them move through and end up in that meeting. But I think that lead gen can be done with very little brand, right? Like you can truly generate leads and have good conversations with an advisor and a prospect without having a brand that they have seen before. And so I do feel like there's a little bit of chicken egg situation that happens there that marketers should not be shy to get the leads moving. And in some ways, it gives you instant credibility within the firm is when you start having $1 million, $2 million, $5 million opportunities show up for your advisors. Everyone's ears kind of perk up, right? And then they start seeing the value of marketing. So it kind of creates that virtuous cycle.
Well, and I think both of you gave some good insights there in terms of how to get started. And again, to Darcy's point, it is fundamentally where you're at currently as a business. You may have muscled your way to $2 billion just doing client service and never done anything outbound. You could be a breakaway and just putting up your own logo and brand name for the first time. So there's different places to start. And so it makes a lot of sense. I think foundationally, just an observation is that when we get called into new client assignments, it's amazing how many firms have neglected sort of the behind the scenes side of their web presence, the SEO, SEM piece, totally underinvested there. When I look at this topic, I think about firms where they'll think about all the different things they're investing in business-wise, and the number one way, besides client referrals, people are coming in is through the web, and they have no strategy, no attention, nothing. And even in 2025, it's still a problem. And so I look at that, and that's certainly would be on my short list of things. Like, at least check this out, see what you're doing there, making sure fundamentally you got that working for you. Switching gears for a second, everyone wants to know, like, how does a firm like yours, and you're both at different size and scale and geography, but how do you budget for marketing and growth? I'm talking about everything that would fall under that. It could be charities, sponsorships, digital marketing, PR, whatever. Like, how do you pick it? Do you pick a percentage of your budget? Do you have a hard number every year? Like, what's a responsible way to look at it and that's reasonable to meet the aspirations of growth? Either one you want to share?
Yeah, I would say we start by looking at the benchmarking studies and getting a sense of how much of our overall revenue are other firms similar in size to us dedicating to marketing. So essentially my CFO gives me a number at the beginning of the year. And then when I think about building out the budget, there are a number of line items that I know are already accounted for, right? The standard costs of our MarTech stack that are going to carry over through this year, et cetera, et cetera. Then I'm also going to work backwards from what are the key strategies this year? What are the big bets we're taking, to use Jim's expression, which I love because it's exactly what it is. You're taking a bet. And so those, allocating a certain, probably larger than normal chunk to those initiatives that are key for just this year. Trying to think if there was one more thing. Oh, and then the other thing I would keep in mind is sponsorship dollars. Are there other firms or business partners in your network that you can tap for sponsorship dollars? That can help you to expand the reach of your marketing programs, not just what you can get access to in-house, but who else would be willing to contribute dollars there.
And Jim, how would you take that?
Yeah, so I think that largely similar in terms of the way we think about the foundational elements of marketing, whether that's CRM, tech stack, conducting events, supporting regional, that kind of stuff, is more of a what do we look at last year? How much have we grown? How do we gear that kind of thing? The place where I think we're a little different is on the our CFO and CEO come with here's how much net new assets we need from marketing this year. What is the budget you need to accomplish that, right? So I was kind of saying, I have this cost per million of net new assets that we measure to. And so based on last year's results, I can say, well, here's the cost of every $1 million of net new assets. If you want X, it's going to cost you Y. We slot that budget in, and then that's working dollars now, right? Those dollars are meant specifically for generating net new assets. So that's the kind of the top down and the bottom up version of the budget that we use.
Well, one of my favorite remarks I heard recently on this is that when someone said, well, do you think 3% is a good amount of your revenue to allocate towards marketing? And the comment I heard, which I love, which is actually, it should be 3% of next year's revenue, with the anticipation, if you want to grow, you cannot expect to invest 3% and grow 30%, right? And so the comment was like, all right, where are you going to meet yourself in the future? And so I think for firms trying to have a starting point, you have to have some aspirational, again, a bet on yourself, so to speak, to be able to really fundamentally drive a program forward. And if you never spent anything, it's hard to, as you said, like you're picking out of thin air in some ways if there's no context for it. So, but good thoughts there. We're wrapping up here, so we get toward the end. There's a question that I want to ask, and we ask everybody here on this question. Think outside yourselves. When you look at the industry, and there's people in the wealth management space, and it could be RIA firms, family offices, you name it, whatever it would be. Is there a particular brand outside your own that you think does a good job advocating for itself, articulating some sort of distinct value that you feel like accomplishes something that's, others would want to repeat? Like, you point to someone you think does a good job. Jim, I'll start with you. I know you've been around the block a bit. I'd be curious to see what you'd say.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I feel like I'm so critical of my own brand, but all brands, right? There's pieces that I like of brands, right?
Give me a piece of, that's exactly what I'm fishing for. Give me a piece.
Yeah. So I was at BlackRock for a time, and I think there is like a place that BlackRock and iShares in particular have gotten their brand that is like, it feels like it's a little untouchable, right? And within that industry, it's got this, it's so clean and cared for, right? So I've always had kind of a soft spot for what that represents. I think that in our industry, I think even things like what Darcy's doing or some other CMOs I know around are, the articulation of the client experience is, I think it's awesome, right? That is in so many ways not only a way to differentiate your firm, but it's actually helpful to prospects to see what a client experience could be like, to understand the value of working with an RIA, right? And so, I could probably rattle off several that do a good job of articulating the client experience, but I think I think is people should aspire to that, right? Like, it's really, if you don't know what an RIA an advisor can do for you, if you haven't worked with an advisor before, it's hard to imagine how much we can do for folks. And so articulating that client experience, I think, is really compelling.
And Darcy, who'd you pick on? Who do you like out there in terms of what they're doing?
I'm going to answer the question in a totally different way, which is to say that I think this is a huge challenge for marketers in the RIA space, because our service offerings often look really similar, and the constant battle is the sea of sameness, right? We're all offering very similar services. Everybody wants to promise strong investment performance and great client service, and then we wound up all sounding the same. And so what I would say is one of the most valuable things we've done is, through a series of client interviews, is to drill deep on why your clients chose you. And when we did this exercise, we came up with 3 answers that are things that our competitors can't necessarily say. And the first is really the sophistication of the investment and planning advice that we offer. We've been investing in alts since our founding in 2004. So it's just been a key part of our investment strategy that we can really hang our hat on. The second is that our partners and employees often invest side by side with the clients, right? So we put our money where our mouth is, and that is something unique in the industry that not everyone can say. And then finally is that we think and act like owners. We have 27 principals at the firm who own a piece of this business. And so we understand what it's like for our clients who are often running businesses or our corporate executives themselves, and we think and act like business owners. So I didn't pick on anyone, but I think I'm picking on everyone, because we all have this challenge of sounding the same. So what I'm trying to do more and more in our marketing efforts is highlight those things that make us different. Even though the other elements are important, they just aren't necessarily as unique as we would like them to come across as when we talk about them.
Well, I think you're both, have a good context here. And of course, everyone likes the red meat, the juicy details. Oh, so-and-so loves what XYZ Financial is doing with their marketing. I do think it does point to a bigger issue that I don't think we have a household names in the industry, right? And you start thinking about, in the RIA space, there's a lot of firms that are household names within the community, where everyone looks and oversees a firm that's grown to, Peter Maluk in creative planning, right? He's 100 billion plus, whatever. And people know him in the industry, but if you ask a random person, half my staff that doesn't work on financial service clients wouldn't know who he is or what their company does, right? And so there's that gap there. But I do think there's a lesson learned, and I'm curious to see what your reaction is. What made the Morgan Stanleys, the Merrill Lynch's of the world household names that unique as those sort of beachheads in the financial community and with consumers is they built huge marketing and brand apparatuses long ago. And you're starting to see that some firms are thinking about that. They have call centers. They have full, lead generation campaigns that they're doing. Fisher, where you came from, Jim, notoriously good or bad or otherwise known for direct mail and heaving on that. And so a lot of the bigger RIA players, particularly, are building these things out that were hallmarks of what those original financial brands that are known as household names across America. And I think we're going to get there. And I think we're coming to like a coming of age event for the industry. I don't know if it's in 5 or 10 years or what, but it's soon where we'll cross that, chasm a little bit and say, yes, there are firms that are known that way. And it'll be a little easier to point out, okay, there's a handful of winners who have done a really good job in articulating their value to family office clients or business owners or athletes and things like that. So I think it's coming, is my point. But I know it's hard today. It's hard to answer that question without, as I was trying to encourage Jim, sometimes it's just a matter of flagging a specific channel or piece of what they're doing as being admirable, because I don't think any one brand, when you think about what firms are trying to do in terms of having perpetual growth and sustainable growth, have really hit it on all cylinders in every which way, which is why we're all here to learn more and talk more about it. So let's do this. Love to hear each of you. What's your parting shot? Any takeaways you want people to hear about you, your firm, what you're doing, marketing in general? Leave us with a good soundbite. And Jim, I'll pick on you first.
Yeah, I think I would love to encourage marketers to get a little uncomfortable with some spreadsheets. I know that a lot of us come to marketing because that's not our jam, but I think that, one of the things we had chatted about before is the old Ogilvy quote of, I know half of my advertising dollars are wasted. I just don't know which half. I'm paraphrasing, but I hate that, right? I deeply hate that saying. And I think that we as marketers need to be better than that, right? We need to know how our money is being spent and how it is impacting our business. And if we all think about we're solving business problems, I think that's a better role for marketers, right? And so I think that would be I think a lot of marketers are that person, but I think that, we need to think about ourselves as that versus, answering requests in the queue kind of thing and, updating someone's photo on the website. That's not what big M marketing should be doing.
And Darcy, what's your parting shot here?
Yeah, I would say invest in branding. You mentioned Morgan Stanley and JP Morgan, and why are those household names today? And clearly they've invested a lot in developing these really household names in really the culture. So I think that a lot of us RIAs, as we're building our firms, we're really focused on the tactics that are going to bring business in the door, because that's what the business requires. And certainly as Simon Quick evolves and grows even more, I would like to start shifting more of our focus to those pure branding efforts to really paint a picture of who we are and own that corner of the marketplace.
Well, Darcy O'Brien at Simon Quick and Jim Mocci at EP Wealth, thanks so much for taking part in today's episode. Really appreciate your time and energy in this, and a lot of great insights. We covered a lot of ground, and we look forward to hearing more from both of you in the future. And so that's the end of today's episode. Appreciate everyone listening. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to Marketing Matchup, a production of Gregory. If you like what you heard, please listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.